This is our monthly water and sewer meeting. It's December the 10th. We have a quorum, so start. And a couple things to add to the agenda. One, after Roman numeral number 5. Before the penalty for failure to secure sewer water connection, we're going to add 2025 sewer water rate review. When we get to that, I'll hook my computer up, and Hayne has put together a spreadsheet that we can. In his bottom line, we want to come up with a recommendation to give to council for next week for the 2025 fees. So, and the second item is to review members' terms, years, and find out going forward if we need to fill the open spaces. So we'll add that right before the next meeting on the back page, right before item Roman number 10. And I have a handout of the summary of the best dates that I can come up with looking at the meeting records in January of each year. So with that, I make a motion with those amendments.
I'll second.
Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, it's approved. It's a copy of the November 12th minutes there for approval. Motion there.
I like motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
Thank you. See any changes or corrections? None. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Hey, Joe, would you take our construction status update?
Sure.
Todd?
First with wastewater treatment plant, construction status, we're really kind of dealing with the remaining punch list items. The most important of which is, well, let's go through the items, I guess, in order. Sorry. The first is the pay request number 32 for $23,169.32. That's for payment of the WAS pumps that'll be installed in the SBR next week. They have been delivered, so we're making payment for them, and then also payment for the lab equipment that
For the total.
yeah. Change order number 5 was approved last month by the city council, and was submitted by the MPCA. And then we get to the punch list issues, the outstanding issues the contractor is working to address. The most important one is item A, the electrical switch gear. As you recall, we've been waiting on that, and we were supposed to get that, I think, in October, and then maybe November. And we got this letter from Eaton. And so on the backside, some correspondence, a little bit of email correspondence from me.
Copy.
Yeah. Basically, the letter says that the electrical switch gear won't arrive until the end of December or possibly early January. We'll see if that indeed happens. They've got all kinds of excuses associated with material shortages and labor issues and all the stuff that we've all heard before. The bad part is, you know, it's big wire dealing with the switch gear coming into the building, and when it's really cold, that wire is hard to deal with. And so the contractor is kind of saying, if it's really going to come in January, they don't want to be there in January to install it. And I can appreciate that. Everything is running find on the temp panels that we do have. I don't see a reason to push the issue in January or February. Assuming that it does come in January,
Are we holding back on enough money to?
we are.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple $100,000 in just that item sitting there, plus all the retained projects, so. I don't think it's the contractor's issue. I truly do believe it's Eaton and the supplier, the supplier of the. We don't have any control of that, neither does the contractor, but it's still a sore point, obviously. So that is the unfortunate update that it looks like it'll probably be March before that actually gets installed, assuming that it does come in January or February, I guess, at this point. Other issues, the waste activated, lift pumps that go on the SBR, they have been delivered. They're scheduled to be installed next week. In fact, all of the punch list items here are really scheduled to be addressed next week. Based on the contractor's feedback, he's trying to line everybody to be out there at the same time so the work can get checked off and addressed. Kane, any items, updates, things you want to talk about in that vein? I guess you've been a party to the correspondence and you're also out there a lot more than I am.
Yeah, I think I copied on that email yesterday with automatics coming out next week as well. So hopefully next week there's some action and see some of these items fall off the list.
Some automatic systems items won't fall off the list until the switch gears and then the final programming can be done. But at least a few of their issues, and especially the most recent issues with lift station and a few other things, can be addressed.
Yep.
Anything else there or from anybody else you guys want to talk about?
Do you need the pay request, do you need a motion on that one?
The council actually approves it. We all just put it in there kind of as an FYI, and if people have questions, I'm happy to answer.
We don't have to approve it. Okay.
I don't think we have been.
Okay. Keep moving on.
So the Valmar, they'll be here next week too.
That's what I'm told. Yeah, Valor and Kilmer.
Super. And those take care of the last item, the HVAC.
Yeah, and that is WHV. They're the contractor that needs to deal with that, but that is what I'm understanding is they'll be there too. Do you know anything different?
I haven't heard anything from WHB.
But that's what, that's what Jason kind of said in that email. They're all supposed to be there.
Sure, yep,
So Jeff's gonna be there.
good. I'll be there.
You'll be there. He was gonna call the electrician, make sure he knew when they were gonna be there and.
I think that D there, Joe, the exhaust fan, the power and the motor and we've been back and forth on that so many times. We just need everybody on site before we walk away from it again and.
Right. I agree.
Hope it's not too much of a serial event. One person.
Hopefully not.
So that's also the signage is there now, so stop and put that up.
The signage is not there. They just asked me for some information about the sizes, which are they're detailed in the plans. So they're supposed to be having them manufactured this week so they can install them next week. So they just say Orinoco wastewater treatment plant entry, exit, and then the no trespassing signs, those types of things that go on the perimeter of the fence. So minimal type things, but things that need to be done.
Super.
We do have a people's service operation update. Okay, and I noticed that, the report and the little bit of correspondence I had with Dan indicates that they were having some phosphorus issues, but found out that they had a broken chemical line. What's that about?
Yeah, so the chemical line was broken, so they were not feeding chemical.
Where was it going?
Well, I think it was running back into that chemical, manhole. There's one chemical manhole. I think it was showing itself there.
Okay.
So,
Is that alum, I think?
Yes.
Is that the chemical?
cause that's for the,
Phosphorus.
phosphorus, yes.
So, and the people's repaired that. That must have been a straightforward, the contractor didn't apparently.
Yeah,
I mean, if there was an issue, they should have fixed it.
yeah.
But there's heat trace on a bunch of that too, so I assume that it was I don't know, I just was questioning it.
You know, it's funny, I get a lot of my updates from this update. I don't get it firsthand from people, so.
Yeah.
I'm kind of reading between the lines too here.
Well, next week, let's figure that out.
Absolutely.
We'll ask. Get to the bottom of that, but it sounds like it's been rectified at this point.
For what it's worth, I know during the tour, I think it was the tour, I think they're feeding alum almost continuously. Which I wouldn't expect unless there was a reason for it.
They were supposed to get that, controlled by the flow meter. Incoming flow meter, they were supposed to get chemical feed based on that. So it'd be reactive, it'd constantly be,
Yeah, it really shouldn't be necessary all day, every day, even at low levels, unless there's some other contributing factor with the.
you know, now that you say that though, those sensors in the SBR are giving feedback to the chemical.
I think that's supposed to be automated at this point. and
Right.
It is functional, it was functional.
I believe they got that automated, but back to my email with Dan and Automatic, Joe, I don't know if Dan ever got that finalized.
I thought it was finalized.
I was under that understanding too, and after the weekend alarm and whatnot, I
Yeah.
need some clarification with Dan.
Well, few things to sort out in advance of next week, and if they need to be addressed, we need to get them addressed.
And at the end of the day, if they have to use alum to meet permit, then they have to, but there should be some contributing factor that's causing that hopefully they could address.
Well, definitely weren't doing that earlier in the year, so there's been a kind of a few hiccups or whatever with the operation, different things have happened that have kind of upset things, so.
And it's a relatively spendy chemical.
Yeah.
There's been several things that have been, you know, late to be discovered, right? So weeks go by, months go by, and all of a sudden, hey, this valve was open, right? So we weren't wasting, we were just essentially recycling, and there's multiple things like that. And I think
Yeah.
this chemical line they thought they were feeding, everything looked good, but they were not feeding, so kind of back to the drawing board and
So these lines are from where the chemical building is at, the north side of the SBR up into the SBR or something.
correct. And they're in conduit, they're buried in conduit with a heat trace line to
Right.
keep that liquid, that alum, kind of gets thick, I guess, and it won't flow, so it needs to be heated.
Are all the chemicals temperature wrapped or heat wrapped?
Just the alum.
Right.
Is that why?
And it's not all of it either. I mean, the parts of it that are buried deeper, they're not wrapped, but.
Is that why the phosphorus was so high in October?
It could be,
So we expect
Well, I
that.
hope it's not a temperature related issue.
could be.
Couldn't be.
There will be some of that though, as the temperature of the wastewater decreases, the biology slows down and you have to compensate for that. Usually you bulk up the amount of biology you have in the process because they're not working as hard, so you need more of them. Other things like that, seasonal changes can cause upsets.
Orinoco Estates flow is pretty consistent. 747,000 gallons for September and October.
Close.
Yeah, to be some fluctuation there, I guess. And I don't know what their occupancy rate is, if it's a continuous 80%, 90%, whatever. But,
They've given me the same number of occupancy since we started in April.
Well, they get billed on their occupancy. As you know, part of the ERU factor, so they have no incentive to tell you the truth.
Right. Right
Aside
now,
from,
they're getting billed for 180 ERUs.
But the usage number, that's metered in our metering vault.
Correct.
So that number should be coming out of our,
Of our equipment.
yeah.
well, and if the usage isn't going up, it's likely that their connections isn't going up, at least significantly.
Their average monthly usage since we started April 1st, 803,000. That's their average.
Okay, just a side note there. All right.
Speaking of wastewater flows, Kane, do you think you could look up the flow coming out of the Two Sisters restaurant?
I can.
And the only reason I bring that up is we're supposed to monitor that for the first 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, and potentially adjust their PIP and SAC calculation based on the ERU. If you happen to think to pull that, sentence.
I got it here.
Okay.
Sure, cable will take, and they just have to.
All right. Next item was Fitzgerald.
We do have a small pay request for Fitzgerald as well, totaling $18,486.87. That's mostly for the lift station electrical upgrades at Riverbend Estates. They got done, that equipment came in and was installed. Trip restoration, you know, nothing's happening really on that until next year. The air vac release manholes, I think, the 3 new valve seats were installed that were actually delivered. There are 2 more that are on back order and will be shipped here later and installed. I would think they'd be here soon, but I haven't heard anything about that specifically. I think Fitzgerald will install them as soon as the weather is reasonable, or when the weather is reasonable, and they can put that in. Any new issues on that, Kane?
No, I just think, we need to suck out some of the water that's in them, in the manholes. And then we need to start just monitoring weekly, every other week, and just kind of rate our progress if we do have issues or if there starts to be an issue.
And we went back and looked at the ones with the new softer seats. Is that working?
Those are working, yes,
Well, that's a good sign.
yes. We are gonna do some internal plumbing on those, as far as venting those down. So if they do have liquid, hopefully they'll go into a barrel or something to catch it. So we talked with that Adam, rep on that. So it sounds like we're able to do that.
Smell at lift station 1.
I haven't heard anything
Haven't heard a word.
winter,
Probably won't this time of year.
spring, yeah.
And then I guess the second item is the gas service in River Park. Any additional information on that gas service damage? And sounds like the gas company denied any responsibility for that.
Correct. So the NPL, the gas company, there was a new law, state law, federal law, pipeline law that went into effect in 2012. And since this was constructed in 2005 or 6, when River Park was built, that's kind of the hang up there. They're only liable after 2012. Before that, they didn't have to daylight utilities. They didn't have to verify depths. But since that new pipeline law went into effect after 2012, that's when their responsibility or their takes over. So essentially from 2006, when the gas line was put in the development and the sewer was put in, until 2016, when they built the house, there's 10 years there of who knows what happened. Was it the gas company? Was it, so they're not taking any responsibility for it. I did receive the bill from Gopher Septic. I want to say that was 700 and change, so
Pretty reasonable.
pretty reasonable fix. I did reach out to the homeowners, and since they contacted Jetter Company on their own, after talking with city staff, we decided that the homeowner is responsible for that bill, that Jetter bill, and the city would be responsible for the Gopher Septic, the actual repair of the sewer service, so. Pretty minimal expenses. Got lucky. I think everyone got lucky on this one. Could have been far worse.
So that was the gas company though, that we didn't deal directly with NPL, did we?
As far as communicating with?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
Yep, I contacted NPL directly and explained what happened and. So now
I
what,
suppose because they would have been working on behalf of the developer, not the gas company, right? Or how does that usually work?
I think they had to been working for the gas company.
correct,
They couldn't just install it unless they had a permit from the city to install it, so it's gotta come from the gas company.
so now what they do is they actually send robots down the sewers and up the laterals, and they GPS and locate all those services. And they offered that service to us. They can do that for us in the future. So something to think about if we ever wanted to take on a neighborhood like River Park, Riverwood Hills, Cedar Woodlands, some of those neighborhoods that are some unknowns, right? Right now, I guess if we got a sewer locate in one of those neighborhoods, I wouldn't be able to locate it. that's typical of sewer too. I mean, usually you're not going that deep. You're not. Usually,
So we will have, we do have, all that sewer's been televised and cleaned as part of the project, and we are mapping that in conjunction with the record plans, and so you'll ultimately get that. You know, you'll get at least 2D mapping on it, you won't get the third dimension,
right.
but that'll help locate it.
Absolutely, and we've been using some of that already from the televised, I've got those, files, so when, it comes time to looking for where that Y is on the main or where that T is, you know, we can measure that out manhole to manhole. And that gets us in the neighborhood, right? Now, kind of where it goes from there on the property is,
Yes.
or, you know, elevation and so.
Yeah, for the $700, it's not worth putting up too much of a stink, but if it were through a main, for example, and the cost was significant, I think
Right.
we'd go to the actual gas utility, right?
I'm surprised that they don't have some liability, it's their fault.
Well, they didn't, we haven't just established that. They just said it's not their fault. Every good contractor says that. I mean, and for the $700, it's not really worth fighting it, but because you spend 10 times that. But
I guess that'd be the only recourse is to contact the gas company if you really wanted to, but again, it's not gonna be a quick, easy, painless deal.
No.
You'll probably waste more time than it's worth, but
Weeks before you get a response, if any.
if you get one.
yeah,
And you know, in the future too, if we did want to go the extra mile, if Public Works did, or if the city wanted to advise this, you know, going into the house, getting into the clean out and shoving down a locator through the clean out to the street, you know, that's another option we have. But now we're inside homes and it just opens up maybe some liability.
Yep.
But it is an option.
I don't think you wanna go there unless you really got a problem.
no, I think the best course is have Gopher or whoever do the work. And if it's our fault, we pay for it.
Yeah. And that's one thing we talked about last month too, is defining where those utilities and the homeowners start and stop, so. Hopefully this winter, we've got some time to discuss and define and move forward.
So one quick question, when you televise the line from manhole to manhole on your lateral, between the two, do you actually know where the privates take off, that T?
We know where the service Ts are, yep.
Right.
And it
So,
usually has a like running total of how many feet you are from the manhole, right? You
Yep.
zero it out when you enter and.
yep, once that robot or that camera starts, it just starts ticking away feet. And so 150 feet or whatever it is, put an X on the road and there's our T and
Good information.
Find the bathroom in the basement and
yeah,
eyeball it, yeah.
exactly.
All right, anything else with Fitzgerald? Oh, that truck sitting out there on Second Avenue, do they know that one window is busted out? The right side mirror in front of the one that flips open,
I'll contact Luke or Joe and let them know.
been busted for quite a while, but I don't know what's in there, maybe
Tacos. They call it the taco truck,
taco special.
so there's tacos in there, yeah.
Okay. Okay, next item, Stantec wastewater project construction services budget shift. And
Did you wanna cover that in sewer water rate review?
what's that?
Your sewer water rate review? I thought that was before.
That's gonna do that right after.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am putting together a letter to the city requesting that we are authorized to shift some budget from the wastewater treatment facility construction service budget to the sanitary sewer collection treatment facility budget. We've got lots of budget in the wastewater treatment facility project, and we're down to about $20,000 in the sanitary sewer collection system budget. We don't have a lot of work remaining in either, but we do have, record plans and follow-up and project closeout and things like that. And so, we'll need some of that extra budget in the sewer collection project. And, there's lots of justification for that. The projects, we've provided services for about a year longer than we expected to. And we've done some additional things like the River Bend Estates sanitary sewer system and related construction services with that, and a whole host of smaller things. But really, I'm not asking for additional budget. I'm just looking to shift budget from one to the other. And at the end of the day, we're still going to be under. So that's what I was hoping.
So do you want a motion to recommend to council to shift that?
I think that would
That'd be
be
good.
appropriate.
One question I have is, well, I make a motion to recommend to council that we approve shifting the $50,000 from the wastewater treatment plant project to the sanitary sewer collection treatment project to cover remaining project costs, closeout and record plan work. Your second,
I'll second that.
Ross, okay.
You said you had a question, Brandon?
Yeah, I had a question. So, at the end, when we get all the work done on either the treatment plant, whatever's left on that project, what happens to those dollars?
Well, they just go away. I mean, if we don't, we bill on an hourly basis. If you don't use it, you don't use it, then you don't pay for it.
There's no bucket left or
Well,
nothing to pay.
so what happens is we submit an invoice to the city submits the invoice to PFA, and they essentially borrow the money to you
Mhm.
through your, at this point, because the grant dollars are all gone, through the clean water revolving loan fund. And then you pay it off over the next
Okay.
30 years. So that's kind of how that works.
Okay.
So if we're under budget, we're under budget, that's great.
Yeah.
It just decreases that
PFA loan.
PFA
Sure.
loan proportionately, yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Approved. Make sure that gets on the council agenda.
I'm pretty sure it is. I do have to draft that letter. Yeah, I'll get that to Jason probably tomorrow.
Okay.
It is on the agenda. I gave him that as an agenda item, so I'm pretty sure he's got that. Another thing that would be good, I think, just for council awareness, is to include this letter from Eaton. We can attach it to the minutes maybe, just
Okay.
so people know.
All right, so next item is our sewer discussion for water and sewer. 25. Now we get the computer up here and we'll show that spreadsheet for calculations. Okay, Jason, hope I don't lose you.
Ryland, I just sent you a new spreadsheet. Let's try that new one. If you open up your Outlook. Yeah, this might be a little easier. More refined.
All right, what are we gonna do first? Water?
Sure, that's an easy one.
Why don't I want to do this? And go away, okay.
So this first screen here, yeah, Ryland's making it bigger. You can see the column B and C, those are the 2024 water rates, residential, non-residential. So the green is your base rate for ERU. The blue is your usage rates. And so if you go to those columns D and E, Ryland.
Yep.
Right there, the green highlighted, and you put in, say, 5%, put in a 5 there. And enter, and so that shows you kind of what the impact is for residential accounts. Now, I just threw 5% out. But if we did a 5% increase on the ERU, the base charge, the state surcharge stays the same, well 2 stays the same, but you come up with a new amount for your base rate.
$1 more. From 25 to 26.
Yep, $1 more there at 5%. And then so if you go to your usage rates down
So-
to,
Is that bottom, is that total base rate supposed to be the sum of the numbers above it?
come again, Dylan, I guess.
So do these three numbers added together equal this number? Okay, they kind of do though. So,
They do.
yeah,
Somehow,
but they don't here.
because of 81 and 5 stay the same.
Oh, I guess they do, don't they? Yeah.
Why doesn't that,
Can you move your cursor down to this box, please, Ryland?
yeah, the 26.99, that's correct. So yeah, you take D4 times 1 plus D4 times D3. So it's just a,
Okay, so you're adding this 5% to some of these.
you're adding the
You're not-
5%
it doesn't
just.
Go up, go down.
You just add it to the 2017, just to the facility charge, not the state surcharge, not well two.
Okay,
You just add it to the facility charge.
okay.
So last year, Ryland, did we do a 4% raise? Is that,
Um,
or I wanna say it was 5% last year.
I don't think it was 5. I don't think it was as low as 3 or 3.5. Well, sewer, we talked about 5% and 3% on water, kind of that's how he said, looked at our wax sack charges.
So maybe one of my questions to the committee and ultimately the council is, you know, how do we want to structure our rates? If the expenditures for the water utility are 500,000, right? We wanna take 500,000 in, we wanna break even, right? We wanna cover our expenses. But is there, how much of a buffer do we want to add to that? And I know we can't overcharge, we can't say we wanna throw 20% on top of that. you know, the PFA, there's rules there, we can't gouge.
Well, but I would suggest that you start building a reserve to
Yes.
do maintenance or capital improvements, you know, you're gonna wanna pull a well. You're gonna have some maintenance there, you know, potentially someday you might want to expand that 300,000 gallon tank to a 500,000 gallon tank. Those things cost money, and if you're building a reserve to complete capital improvements, that's perfectly acceptable to do that proactively through the rate structure.
Right.
So I would encourage that, because some of those costs are coming. I mean, some of those things are gonna happen. You know, even replacing hydrants, things like that, water meters, all that. There's gonna be capital costs. And to project some of those and start building them into your rate structure makes a whole lot of sense.
So,
So this is just, so let's just.
Yeah.
So the 5% for the base rate, but if we, I say we should look at a 5% then for the usage rate too then, or is it, can it be less then, or should it be more?
I would just say the same as a conversation piece, if you put 5% there, Ryland, so that changes all of your tiered rates, you know, under 5,000 is lower, 5 to 10 is a little higher, 10 to 15 is a little higher. And then at the bottom there, you know, we're combining your base rate plus your usage. And you're kind of seeing what that change is. And then that net effect, the yellow down below, that's times 450 users or whatever I put there. 442 ERUs at 3,000 gallons a month. A 5% increase on both usage and rates nets you 8,000 and change.
So is your usage really that low? 3,000 gallons a month, even if you can include all the irrigation and all that?
I just averaged that, Joe, with 442 users.
Yep.
Divided by what we're metering.
In our November meeting, I think the water rate average for what was in the packet was 3,500 gallons per average use per user.
Could be.
I think we're between 3,000 to 5,000 if you average it out. Now there's 20 to 30 out there right now that are less than 100 per month, right? But then there's 20 to 30 that are 10,000 plus. So if you go the average route, I think you're between that 3,000 and 5,000. So
it's $18, is it annual?
that would be the difference. Yep. So you're paying an extra, what is it, $1.53 per month times 12 months. It's $18 extra a year at 3,000 gallons.
Okay. I just want to make sure that was not a monthly change.
Nope.
So
Nope.
you took it times 12, okay, all right, in your formula.
Yep. I didn't do the formula for the non-residential, just because the majority of our meters are residential. But you can tell they pay a little bit more, the non-residential accounts.
I guess back to your original thing though. What do we need to cover our expenses and build a reserve? So what does that yellow number need to be to cover all our expenses for next year? With building up reserves so that we can do things.
You look at our audit reports for the last couple of years, in the past, we've done like 3.5%, 3%. Maybe it was 4 last year, I don't remember. But we're still not positive. And that's what they recognize when Smith and Schaefer do our audits, they recognize that there's depreciations and changes, but you want to make sure you're trying to get to that line, because that's what PFA watches. They want to make sure you're charging them so they get some security that they're getting money back. So. So 5% maybe something we need to consider. It's a modest $18 a year for 3,000 gallons, so
Do we know what that deficit was though, or had most recent?
it was in our. You remember? I don't remember.
I guess that's where I'm going.
Yeah,
It's like, does it need to be 6%? Does it need to be 8%? Like, we shouldn't be in a deficit situation. That's not a good position for the city to be in.
Another
And
thing to consider is you've added a lot of users over the last year that aren't necessarily accounted in last year's audit, so things should improve. From a cash flow
Like the businesses, that's why they pay higher.
Well, and just all the, you added 100 connections just on the water side over the last year. And so they wouldn't have shown up in the previous audit.
depending on what the audit showed and the forecast from that, we may not need a rate increase at all. I think that's unlikely, but without kind of knowing what that deficit is. it's
Well,
hard.
and knowing that you want to build a cash reserve to be able to implement some capital improvements, I would not do an increase. You know what I mean?
I
If it starts
agree.
to
We
build
need
up
general
faster
order.
than you want, then, yeah.
5%.
Joe, are you talking about the 600 and 602 accounts?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think one of those is at a deficit of like a negative 150,000 approximately. The other is at negative 250 right now.
Well, the audit is from what showed in 2023, so, but that's.
Yeah, which is why Mr. Bubani, had recommended with the 425 account, it was supposed to help with those until we got some footing under us, got a couple years under us of flow and increase usage and increase in rates to help offset those deficits.
Well, let's leave it at 5 for a second and let's just go look at sewer.
Yeah.
We'll come back to this. But Jason, to your question, I don't think those audit reports, the PowerPoint that Andrew gave us in August, was that in the packet or not? Was that just a handout?
I don't recall. It might have been a handout. There was
I think it was a handout, I
a
don't-
lot of pages in there.
What's that?
There was a lot of pages in there. I don't recall, what it said for those two specific accounts off the top of my head.
I think it was just a handout, which is what they typically do, so.
And that's a year behind, right, Ryland?
Yes.
That last was for 2023. So on the sewer rate page here, Ryland, same thing. Cell C2, you can enter in a percent change, and you can see the effect it has on the rates and your monthly bills.
So did the 5 come over from the water?
No, you can
Oh,
change
sure.
that completely separate.
So let's just talk about 5%.
Okay.
Base rate went up $1 a nickel.
So yeah, when you go down to row 12, column D, you start to see that change. 3,000 gallons, you're looking at a $1.86 difference. 5,000 gallons, $2.39. And then the next column, that's times 12, so that's your annual change. And then of course,
So. Oh, it's okay. This is a total sewer bill, base and usage,
base and usage, yep.
$22 over 12 months.
What's the What's the reasoning for only changing the usage rate and not the base rate?
I changed them both, have them both at 5%. Are you saying don't do that?
No, I thought when we were, oh, no, you're right, I'm sorry.
We're on sewer now, maybe.
Yeah, no, even on the water side, they were separate.
They're separate,
You
yep,
could adjust them independently, but we
correct.
played with 5% on it, okay.
So my understanding, Dylan, is if we adjust the base rate, we're affecting everyone. The person who doesn't spend their water meter, or the person that is 100,000 a month, right? That base rate's gonna get everyone. Now,
Which, when you're talking about cost increases, things like labor rates, chemical costs, well, maybe not chemical costs, but some of those costs, are or should be equally distributed. Some not so much, but
right,
they should be based on usage, but. Well, I think we're more than annual average rate of inflation for 2024. So we're at least not losing ground in that regard. So I think that's good. And if we are in a deficit, I think, that's appropriate.
Well, we don't know what we don't know,
Yeah, and
just because they're starting up and still adding and
at some point, I think
partial year, so.
having a audit/rate study would be warranted so that we know what those rates really should be, so that we can, so that if something breaks, we can pay to fix it. We can plan for the capital improvements without having to borrow 70+% of the money.
So explain the total effect again.
so the total effect, Ryland, that yellow cell at the bottom there, that's the city of Orinoco plus Oakwood Meadows times their ERUs, right? So, average flow at Oakwood Meadows is 803,000 per month. So with a 5% increase, you'll see, 4,800. Cell E26 there. That's for Oakwood Meadows, that's a 5% increase. For both base and usage. And then, cell E31, there's an $18,000 increase for Orinoco. So we've got 442 ERUs at 3,000 gallons per month average. So that 23,000 is Oakwood Meadows plus Orinoco, gives you that 23,000.
Oakwood Meadows is the new name for Orinoco Estates.
Yes.
So the 23,000, that's the total for the year of the 5% increase to the
Yep.
city?
Yep, we'd see a 5%, we'd see 23,000, 5% usage and base.
Joe, how much do you
That
think
doesn't
it,
seem like a lot.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, how much do you think it costs to have a rate study done for the two enterprise funds and?
Depends on how detailed you want your rate study. They can be $10,000 to $50,000, I suppose. Just off the top of my head. It depends on how detailed of an analysis you want. You can do a pretty straightforward one. Mike Bubani probably do a pretty straightforward one
Yeah.
for next to nothing. Where things get a little more complicated as you start building in your CIP into that and, should have real dollars attached to those capital improvements and things like that, but I don't know that I would do a rate study quite yet. I think that in a
No,
few
right.
years,
I
it's a
think-
good idea.
I think making sure that the utilities have the money to do the rate study.
Yeah.
I think we're at that point though, right? To make sure that we build up a $30,000 cushion with the expectation that we're gonna have to do a rate study so we can really get these forecasts.
So when this rate goes up, you do it to both residents and non-residents, right? You have two fees for resident and non-resident? What's the-
Residential and non-residential
That's a business?
for the water, yep. So
But right now, we don't have any percentage in for the non-residential.
we do, you can add that, it's just not factored in. You know, there's 20-some non-residential accounts, right? So I just did it,
There's zero.
right,
We would increase those too. You wouldn't just sock the residents, because the
Correct.
non-residential is using it too.
yep. I just timed it by the amount of ERUs we have total.
And most of the additional properties served have already connected, right? The vast majority, or are you still gonna have a lot of sewer and water connections in the spring?
We're gonna have quite a few, I bet you we've got, 50 to 60 sewers. And about 50 waters.
So we may not have a really good picture on
Left,
revenues
Correct.
until 2026.
It's more than I thought we were closer, or I thought we had more
You
connection.
know what, maybe water is only, I got that
it
wrong.
was 10, less than 10,
10 are facing the deadline, Riley.
water only.
Yep, 10 are facing that November deadline.
I mean, I can support a 5% increase, but I think, with the expectation that
Yeah,
at some point, we're gonna have to do more than just, well, it's an extra $20 a year for most property owners. We need to,
Yeah, make sure we cover our expenses.
close the deficits, and build up that, or at least, I don't know about build up, but establish some cash reserve.
Riley, you put 5% in the non, I just want to see how much things go up.
Non-residential,
E3 and E10. Just curious what that 8,000 goes up to. How much?
Like I say,
that's just the residential.
it's just to factoring the residential.
Gotcha.
The 20 or so non-residential ones, I think they pay just slightly higher rate. So it's not a huge amount. So I guess what I'm missing here, you guys, is how big is the loan, right? Do we owe $1 million? Do we owe $10 million, right? That's gonna factor into how aggressive we're gonna be. And then also, so back to my original question was, do you want the base rates to pay the loan off and usage to supplement future capital improvements, right? You could look at it that way. Say everyone shuts their faucets off, right? They're all gonna conserve water. We still wanna be able to pay off our water and sewer loans with the base rates, right?
I'd say that's the most important one, yeah.
It's very conservative. It's very conservative if all of us who have water and sewer pay a higher base rate that covers the loan payment and all of our usage then supplements or funds beyond that, right?
I'm not a money guy, honestly, but generally speaking, in my head, base rates should cover fixed costs. Variable costs that vary with the demand on the system should be covered by usage rates. And things like your plant investment fee, your water access charges, those should be used to cover capital costs. Either recoup those retroactively to pay off loans or build up the reserves to pay for future improvements, but that's probably oversimplified, honestly. There's
So here's some real numbers. People Services is charging us $225,000 per year. The city is also contributing $75,000 in wages for sewer, just sewer right now. So just wages, the city, Jason's time, Renee's time, my Public Works time, and people's 300,000. No utilities yet. So if you throw in utilities and you throw in chemical and you throw in the bare bones on what that sewer utility needs, let's just say 320,000, 350,000, right? Would your base rates cover that 350,000, or would they cover just a portion of those expenditures?
I think a rate study would give us a better, I mean, honestly, you don't wanna listen to me on this stuff. I mean, I could be leading,
I think there's a need for a rate study. I don't think it's right yet,
Right.
just because not everybody's hooked up.
yeah, and there's
Kane,
historical cash flow to
We have
really
nothing,
project.
that's why there was 150,000 put into our, from the CIP fund into our cash flow analysis to give us that buffer until we do get to a steady 3-4 years from now, whatever that
I
number
guess
is.
so, but we should have an idea for 2024, what did we pull in our accounts, right? Because we collected that. So if we're having to spend $350,000, what did we collect? Obviously, we didn't have sewer the whole year, but water and stuff, like, are we covered? I heard.
Is the deficit gonna get bigger or
I heard we're
smaller?
not covering ourselves. Like, yeah, and then we have 50 more users or whatever it is, you know, we should have a ballpark to get us there based on our current rates. And then if we add another 5% or whatever, it only adds a little bit extra, but you know, does it? That's what I want to know. It's like,
Right.
how are we covering? But I haven't heard yet is what are those magic numbers that we need to hit and what are we pulling in right now?
The other part of the equation that we haven't talked about, is the WAC and SAC and PIF funds that do come to the city through development, and then the connections that come with that development and the extra usage. So they all bring in, you know, those fees are significant and they do come back to the utility. And they help the utility pay not only for operation maintenance, but principal and interest payments on your loan. So it's there's a number of things to consider there.
Typically, I mean, the simple cash flow, I think that was maybe in the facility plan, kind of set a lot of that basic structure, right?
It did. Yeah, Mike's got a, you know, like Bonnie's got, he can model this. And update.
Kane,
That's, you know,
Kane, I just sent you a couple messages, picture messages of stuff that Mike Bubani talked about that we've kind of talked about as well. And I think you've got the Excel spreadsheet somewhere, but it kind of gives a breakdown of possible expected expenses and revenues for both the water and sewer accounts.
Yes.
Did you get those messages?
Yep, so, expenses for water would be 300,000. And expenses for sewer is around 700,000.
Correct.
So if we use those two numbers as ballpark expenses.
So just so everybody understands, looking at what we're kind of looking at here, under the expenses, you have rough estimates for utilities at 15,000, maintenance at 50,000, engineering at 10,000, equipment at 50,000, chemicals at 50,000. Then there's bond principals, so principal amounts on the bonds of 348,000. And I believe those are from 2022. And then the interest, the bond interest is 114,348. And then transfers out to general fund to support salaries of 75,000. That's for the sewer. Expenses for the water, again, 15,000 for utilities, 30,000 maintenance, 10,000 engineering, 25,000 equipment, 25 chemicals. You have two bond principal payments for $105,000 from 2009 and 2022, and bond interest of $13,270 from 2009 and 222, and then another transfer out for salaries of $75,000. So those were from Mike Bubani as kind of, estimates of what expenses might cost. Those were quick estimates. He also, Kane, on there, it shows what the expected revenues would be potentially, or could be, or what we might shoot for. But I don't know how that would break down with your numbers. You'd have to put that into your calculations for the base fees and the volumetric fees, as well as any other development fees or special assessments.
Did he propose what
So-
those fees should be to cover these 300 and 700?
No, he didn't propose anything. Like I said, he put numbers into the revenue side, but he just, let me see here for a second. Yeah, we just plugged in numbers as to kind of what you would need to do as far as to help cover the cost to make it an even balance of revenue and expenses. So, like, it's really going to depend on, what rate you're looking at to be able to meet those. So, and again, Kane's got these numbers in the picture there. So for the sewer, he put in here budgeted $122,000 brought in for volumetric fees, $163,000 brought in for base fees. Estate sales stuff from Orinoco Estates, $34,000, development fees, $10,000, special assessments from Orinoco Estates and local special assessments of $252,000. And then investment earnings of $5,000. And then it also had $126,000 from general capital fund to increase, to help cover the costs for the year. So that's that 425 account. So bringing in from there that we're bringing in on the other side in the 100 fund to help cover the sewer. The water, their volumetric fees was about 157,000. Base fees was 100,000, development fee 10,000, special assessments for local assessments was about 53,700, investment earnings of 5,000, and then a miscellaneous revenue of 5,000.
So I hear all the big numbers and I can't grasp this, what we're talking about here. 23,000 here.
But
The
that's a
sewer
net
increase.
change,
That's
right?
just
That's-
Just
that's
a
not-
change, that's just
Yeah.
an increase.
So I think, this spreadsheet really looks at it kind of from the bottom, the user perspective, right?
How much
Um,
more?
For me, I think it would be helpful looking at the net fund. How much are we spending? How much are we bringing in? And then, using that information, say, okay, well, we need to raise rates by, or we need to collect $1 million. Okay, now what does that do to our rates if we adjust our rates to get to $1 million? Well, that's a 35% increase. Well, that's not practical, right? But you forecast on that and you incrementally work to get there. But I would approach it that way. Is this something that we need to
Well, I think we
set
need a.
today?
No, I don't think we can, I don't think we have all the good information. I appreciate what Jason shared with us, but I don't think we have it for us to work with, I guess.
No, and my thought was to get you guys thinking about it because we'll have one more meeting before the January meeting when we set the fine schedule. And I wanted to try to get this going to make sure that, it wasn't pushed on last minute in January to try and do anything. But to try maybe set a base, give Kane a number to start to work with, and Kane and I can sit down and then plug and play with that estimated number to bring back to January, to show what that would do. That was my thought.
So,
Okay.
so maybe where I struggle with it, guys, is I hear this $47 million phase 1A water and sewer improvements project, right? And we know some of it, a portion of it was covered in grant money, but there is the city's portion left, right? So the unknown here to me is, what is that number? It's owed and we need to pay it back within 30 years, but we also need to start making a reserve, right? So those are the unknowns for me. So when I look at this 5%, I don't know if I'm standing in a pothole or if I'm standing in a volcano, right? I don't know how, like Dylan said, do we need to increase 35% to start making that? I don't know. So, and that's one thing I'd like to just get the right information at my hands, at the city's hands, and then maybe this would be something that water and sewer could review maybe quarterly to say, hey, here's the payment back to PFA. Here's what we owe. Here's the projections. This is a Mike Bubani presentation. I mean, Mike's our guy for this. Maybe we could invite him to the water and sewer meeting and get water and sewer to buy in on it. And then that, of course, goes to council and.
Well, you know, with this, we've only got 3/4 of a year,
Correct, yep.
so. You know, maybe after the first of the year or 1 January, that before a water and sewer meeting, we can. We'll have our expenses and. Revenue and everything going into January, so we have that 75% of a year, if that's even enough projection for him to work with. It gives a flavor for how that fits into his original cash flow and see how far we're off, on track. Call in the troops, whatever it takes, but yeah, I think it's.
Because Mike Bubani said initially, Ryland, we need to take money from the CIP fund
Absolutely.
and put into the into the sewer fund to start paying that loan off. To supplement that,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
So in 2025, I take it, that means we're gonna take money out of CIP and transfer into sewer, right? Same in 2026 and a possible few years here.
Get more homes on more units.
Yep, I you know, going through the budget meetings, there's all these wants and needs of the city. Streets and roads, parks, fire, everyone needs, everyone wants, right? But I feel like they don't understand that we've already committed this 100 or 150 every year to help out with the sewer fund.
So is it possible that Mike, before the next meeting, can put something together to say, what should our revenue, based on 3/4 of this year, here's our revenue, I recommend you guys at a rate increase of X, Y, or Z on these, so that you guys get it closer. If we can't get to all of it, if he's already saying we're gonna have to use some supplemental, but then give us a plan, like a multi-year plan. So if you do 5% this year, 6%, 7%, we'll get to a point where now we're building up reserve, covering our expenses, paying off the loan.
So,
And if I understand correctly, that money that is transferred into the enterprise fund should get paid back to the general fund. It's not a gift, it's a,
correct.
yeah.
Eventually your sewer becomes a money maker.
Well,
and
nobody is all,
It's not
break
set up
even.
like that.
But you do pay it back.
You pay
No.
back,
It's not set up like that. So
I don't think we do.
no?
the thought process is that we are supplementing, the city is supplementing the PFA loan for the wastewater project with general tax revenue to the tune of, you know, $100,000 or $150,000 for the next 4 or 5 years. Then it stops. And the thought process there is, you know, we reconstructed 3 or 4 miles of street in conjunction with the project. Many of those streets needed to be reconstructed. And so the cost to reconstruct those streets far exceeds the cost that of the CIP supplement into the wastewater fund.
Okay.
And so the general tax levy typically pays for street rehab or street reconstruction. And so
In any event, though.
that was the thought process that was used. So
But it shouldn't be viewed as general tax levy funds supporting the enterprise.
That's not
They're
how.
paying for services and work that was performed.
Right.
All right. I just want to make sure that it's not looked at like that.
Right.
And so there is another, just a little bit more information for everybody. So there is a detailed projection, a cash flow projection for the wastewater project that goes out 30 years, right? And so that's predicated on estimates of the construction costs, project costs. It has projections and how much development we're gonna see and what the rates are. You know, all of that's changed a little bit, right? Our project costs are a little under what we thought they were gonna be, big picture. The ERUs that are gonna be developed over the next year, 5 years, 20 years, 50 years, they're a guess. Right? And so we don't know what that's gonna look like, and that has a pretty significant impact on the bottom line. And then the other thing that's built into that is usage rates and revenue and an annual increase. And I think we projected 3 or 5% onto that. So there's a lot of variables within that cash flow projection. I think a lot of them are changing yet. You know, the final project costs, the final loan amounts haven't been established yet. You don't have all the users connected. You know, the private development picture is evolving. And you know, what we can expect out of that, I think those estimates can kind of continue to change too. So there's no perfect way to do this, but you do have, Mike has a very detailed, good cash flow statement and our cash flow projection for both utilities, sewer and water. And he, you know, can put CIP improvements and expenditures within that. He has that tool. I would continue to refine that and amend that. Whether it's pertinent to do it now or next year. My 2 cents is I think there's too many variables right now that are changing. So I would probably wait. I think you've got a 3 or 5% built in for utility rates. I think I'd probably stick to at least a 5%. You know, I don't think, even if he went to 10%, it doesn't really move the needle compared to the other variables. It just doesn't matter that much. So if you projected a 5% increase, I'd go with a 5% increase, and then I would start to look at things more carefully as the number of variables within the projection solidifies.
Yes, part of me, the only concern I have is I don't want to get into a spot where then all of a sudden we have to raise like 35% one year, because that would not be some residents, that would be very detrimental to.
Yeah.
Right? So if we're gonna do something, we should do a nice, slow, gradual, something that is more in pace that people can afford, as opposed to have to make a 35% increase because we're in a hole, we gotta pay something back. So that's where I think, if this isn't the year to do it because we have so many more users to hook on, we don't have a full year, that's fine. And if we're already budgeting at 3 to 5%, 5% is a minimal impact based on this calculation sheet, so that for the vast majority of people, it shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
But keep us in the ballpark where we can cover our expenses. But then I think we do need Mike to have a detailed, use his information, if he's got all this data, so that we can make sure that those rates are set appropriately. And we don't find ourselves in a huge deficit where then you gotta make a huge increase or we can fold on a loan. The PFA and others wouldn't want that, right?
And I don't think we need to review everything quarterly. Honestly, my experience has been typically you do a full-blown rate study every 3 years. You go with it for 3 years and then you reassess, and are you ahead of the curve or behind, and then you tweak for the next.
I think that's what a lot of people do,
Rochester,
3 to 5
your
years.
rate or water rates.
Yeah, something like
Resolution.
that, yeah.
They
Yeah,
set the rates for 6 years, but they got a mature system too. So.
right, yeah, I mean, and a lot of history to understand the costs and things like that, so.
And I do think the development impact is significant on that bottom line.
If it doesn't happen,
If it doesn't happen,
then rates have to come to cover for that cost, and
They
if
do.
it does happen, then you're on track.
And his cash flow analysis, he was very conservative with 10 homes a year.
He was, but
So,
you know, how many homes are we gonna get this year?
so like with River Bend, we did 17 that we weren't aware of. So that's,
Yep.
that all helps. So is it? I'm sure there's a lot of startup costs like in the first part of this year that are not normal either, expenses. You think with like chemical startup and,
I think there was some, but I think, you know, in the big picture, you know, you've got some things working for you in terms of construction costs and project costs being slightly lower than, you know, they're big numbers. Compared to, you know, $10,000 for chemicals or something like that, it just.
what do you think it's worth having a conversation with Mike after the first year, just sharing our expenditures, revenue, where we're at? It's just it's not a 20,000 foot level, but a 10,000 foot level is to say, hey, you know, are we doing okay? Or we just missed it completely and we're way off, and it gives him some indication, but maybe he would prefer to see a 1 year, full year before spending the dollars to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and he's not doing it for free either, so.
No, that's what I meant, spending. the
You know,
dollars. But right now, we don't know what we don't know, and
Well, we know quite a bit, it's just that we don't know everything, right? You know, we don't know what the final construction costs are, you know, we know within a few percent, but, you know. So. But we could absolutely do that, you just have to project all those numbers, and then next year you have to project them again, or finalize them again. But
I know that Mike Bubani, when I've talked with him about this since I started, he's always reiterated the same thing, that, you know, it's going to take a couple years before the city can really get a good baseline of where they're at and be able to do solid projections. And kind of to go with what Joe's saying is, yeah, we're not done yet. And he said the same thing. The project's got to finish. We've got to get a full year under our belt to really see where we're at. And then the second full year is where we start to see the trends and patterns start to emerge and really start to see that. So it is going to take a couple years. With that, we should consider, you know, the minimal increases. It'd be something Kane and I might be able to work on to put together something where it shows what would 5%, 7%, or 10% look like, and have those numbers. But, you know, it's one of those things that it's going to take time. And even Mike Bubani is going to say that.
thanks.
so why don't we, Payne, if you want to do your study after the first year, and we'll decide at our January meeting if you feel any better with a 5 or 7 or whatever that number is. So let's just do that.
Yeah.
And we'll forego having the Mike Babani conversation because we don't want to. We just have too many unknowns until we get a full year like we're talking about. I don't think it's worthy of his time, our time, and
I
we
just,
come to audit time. We'll come to audit time and just say, well, we did what we thought we could do, and maybe it wasn't good enough, so we'll change our attitude.
And I will check in with Mike. I can talk with him for a little bit, and he's not going to charge me. So I can talk with him for a half hour, and he's been real good about that with me as I'm learning these processes and these things of not billing me, and to call him with questions. So, you know, if I put something together and say, hey, can you spend 15 minutes looking at this with me real quick and see if we're on track, he'll do that. So I'll try to get that done before January, your guys' January meeting.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks, Jason. Any questions? We'll move on. It's probably in process. The penalty for failure to secure. The staff had that discussion.
we're working through that, Jason and I.
In control. Next item is the cybersecurity service plan.
I do not have an update from them. Hopefully on something here first of the year.
Okay. Next item was our Cedar Woodlands lift station.
We're gonna think about getting a generator receptacle on that Cedar Woodlands.
Yeah.
In process. One thing about that lift station is if it does fail, it will overflow onto the ground. It won't back up into basements.
which is a permit violation, but relatively limited liability.
Correct. Not saying we should walk away from it, but that is something unique about that design, so.
Well, and depending on how that's configured too, the panels are old, you know. Not, I guess I haven't even seen, I don't remember what it looks like, but I can't imagine it's an impressive.
It's not impressive at all, no. So it may require something more than just a generator receptacle. It may require a little bit more refurbishing and repairing, replacing, so.
And maybe you wanna do that all at once, you know, maybe you just wanna see how it operates over the next
Yep.
year and.
And we got it fixed now, so there's two pumps working and they're working the way they should, so, you know, we bought ourselves some time here.
I think the electrical utility will probably want you to, they don't typically like, you know, people plugging generators onto the grid. So there'll probably have to be a separate 3-position switch for that,
Correct, yep.
which because it's separate, it could be outside of the control upgrade. So I don't know that there's much value in necessarily pursuing both together. I think if one presents itself before the other, then
Yeah.
it would be fine.
You know, the River Bend lift station, I should show you that, Dylan. That's because we kept the old gear and just replaced or added a generator switch, a 3-position switch, so.
You talk about the reposition switch, is that something that we have on all of our other lift stations for that purpose of?
Yes, so it's how do I say it?
Utility power on the top or bottom, and then off in the middle, and then generator power in the.
So you can never have utility power and
Generator.
grid power or generator power at the same time. So it's here or there, nothing in between, so.
Not an issue.
It disconnects one source before reconnecting to the other.
Yeah.
Okay, before start of next discussion, I was gonna bring in the maps, or a couple of the maps, talking about phase 1B. And we talked about the 2030 timeframe, and those were all when MPCA was down here for the one of our, was a sign off, Corey, back in September. But he made the comment about, are you starting to plan for MPC, or are you starting to plan to present something to MPCA about phase 1B in 2030? So it's on the forefront of their mind. We've been telling them the whole time we've been talking through our facility plan, so. I think it's something that we needed to start talking about. And, I don't know, Joe, did you have any kickoff ideas, or where do we start with our phase 1B, now the plans in place?
Yeah, you know. We have some. Configurations and ideas, in terms of, you know, we know how those areas are gonna be served. It was addressed within the facility plan to some extent. Previously, and,
Let me pull these sheets I had.
oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's got a map too. These are a couple of pages out of the feasibility report. We talked about users and identifying. And if you look at the sheet, some of those at the top of the chart, there's a summary of those different areas, A, D, E, H, K, P, and M. And some of these have been taken care of, like, K has been taken care of, it's River Bend. The M has been taken care of with Cedar. Woodland, Cedar Point. Two Sisters,
Mhm.
those are taken care of. E, all but one user's been taking care of E, which is along West Center Street.
That was the opt-in option for those folks, right?
Yes, but there's a larger area of E there too that is not in to the west.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the blue E, yeah.
Mhm.
Maybe that's what E is talking about.
So I'm assuming that one property that decided not to opt in, when that phase 1B is executed, the option goes away.
Right, they would just automatically be part of the project, so, you know, this area is A, D, E, H, and P, really, that need to be served. Again, A, D, E, H, and P.
Yeah.
And P is currently in the township, right? But it's surrounded by city, so at some point, that Cravath subdivision would have to be annexed into the city.
Yes.
And so we know some information. You know, part of the process, you know, one of the first steps is really advancing the project and getting on the project priority list, you know, so.
There's two K areas as well. A larger red outline and a smaller blue outline. Are both of those areas, you
Both
mentioned,
of those
Brad,
are in now.
they're both covered.
Yeah, they're phase 1A. The red K was phase 1A, Riverwood Hills. K blue was by petition.
Okay.
Same with M blue over by Gas and Go. I think that there's a letter I over the Hamilton property. But it's neither,
Yeah, but that's not something we need to service necessarily. It was just, well,
we know what happened, but it's
Yeah.
not part of our plan.
you know.
Is there any value or opportunity to use some of those leftover engineering funds from this project to design or do some preliminary design for the next project?
Yeah, there'd be great value. Basically, it's you know, they're giving you money at 1% for 30 years. What's the worst that can happen? They say no. I guess it wouldn't hurt to
Part of
ask.
the project.
Well, it is and it isn't. It's not part of the phase 1A project, and that's what, you know, the loan dollars are really predicated on, but I didn't think they would allow us to use the loan dollars for Riverbend Estates improvements, and they did. So
All they can say is,
all they
We
can
don't
say
think
is
so.
no, so that's a good idea, honestly. I mean.
that would help out with some feasibility studies and
Mhm.
Soil borings or something, maybe, I don't know.
Right, well, you know, the process is really, and, you know, you probably want to get on the project priority list and probably want to do a facility plan for that specific area that updates costs and then it's a matter of funding it, looking for opportunities to fund it, you know, and there's lots of work in between now and then. I mean, in order to score well on the project priority list, there's some steps to take, you know, we would wanna,
now.
yeah, identify areas that are substandard. And so like in the downtown area here, the very first step we did back in 2013 was to apply for these community assessment grants and evaluate on-site systems. Well, I don't think we're gonna find a lot of failing systems on the west side, but we might in the Cravath area. I think, you know, just understanding what is there, you know, even in those community systems on the west side, some of them are 30 years old. We don't know what condition they're in, and doing some investigation in that, and, you know, using that information to, you know, improve our project priority list scoring. Makes some sense.
So would it be appropriate to ask the authority who controls that money if that would be an appropriate use? Or a portion of it, understanding that we don't want to spend a bunch of it on a bunch of pre-design work and then end up short on project management, but.
I think that that's a pretty good idea. Honestly, now would be good timing for that, because, you know, none of the projects have been closed out, and we're in a favorable position in terms of our overall budget. And, you know, I think the PCA wants to see those next phases implemented, and maybe, you know, like I said, what's the worst that could happen if they just say no? And then if they do say no, then you'll start to look for other funding sources. Maybe we try to tap into that community, small communities grant program again, and see if we can do a small community assessment report. Evaluate that, and that'll help feed into our application for the project priority list. And, you know,
That's usually done in June or July, I think, isn't it?
the PPL is due, the applications are due in March or April.
Oh, really? The 2025 project priority list came out today, or there was an update.
Yeah, that was the final intended use plan for 2025. The
land
IUP,
use.
not the P, yeah. So it's the second step of the PPL is the IUP, yeah.
The general consensus among the folks I work with is not to expect any real changes in the way that some of those programs have been funded. Things like, you know, the backlog of projects that have been approved but unfunded is probably going to grow. The point source implementation grants,
Right.
not going to bulk those caps up at all. So.
The legislature kind of hurt the state in those programs badly, because I've got communities that are on the IUP for the Clean Water and Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund for 2025. They've got projects that are under design. They will be built. They should be funded through that program, but there was no bonding bill. And so the state didn't push money through the bonding bill into that kitty, so they didn't get a federal match, and now there's no money. And so everybody that is on the IUP for those programs for next year, it's just, sorry, there's no money. And so that could have been us here, and what would we, you know, that would have totally screwed us. And there's cities that they're totally getting screwed, and it's not their fault. Bonding bill didn't pass.
But I would expect there's going to be a lot of people trying to fight for whatever money sources of funding are available for that kind of stuff. So again, getting started early is probably valuable.
Well, what, do you want to ask?
I think that's a,
Something, or a letter of support from us, or whatever the case may be, but we can sure provide whatever you need, but.
yeah. Yeah, I'll just kind of, I'll put it out there, and if there's any interest, maybe might take a council resolution or a, you know,
Yeah, that's.
a letter from the
Before, and
Jason and the mayor, you know, might take some of that, but I think it's a good idea.
that's, could be a couple $100,000.
Well, again, you don't wanna,
Somebody would probably argue, well, we could keep it on the. I mean, it's money we're gonna have to pay for, it's just a matter of. Phase 1A people paying on that loan to use that money for phase 1B.
It's just such a big advantage when, you know, you're
Yeah.
borrowing money at 1% over 30 years, you just. It's,
It just
it's a big
extends.
I wish I could
advantage.
do that.
Yeah, I wish I could do that too.
Well, that's maybe the first thing to do is just see what kind of
Yeah.
response you get and then from
I can
go
do
to
that.
plan B after that, I guess, so. That
That's,
assessment survey, have any idea how much that would cost or
what's that?
that assessment survey? You think we have to, you know, the township area, I've never heard of. I mean, it's more from an MPCA to look at them versus annexing, I mean, I don't think they're excited about, but, or maybe they are, I don't know, but that's just, I got the impression they weren't, but.
Well, at some point, you know. They're surrounded by city, they utilize city services, they drive on city streets, they go to city parks. They, you know, they should be annexed into the city,
No, it's
in my opinion.
very legit. Okay. All right, last item. Awareness. In January, we'll be taking a little bit different approach of our water and sewer commission never had bylaws. And so that's one issue that we're gonna approach, and there's bylaws out there. PNC has them, Parks Trails has them. And, so it's something that water and sewer, we need to put together a couple of things. One is our set of bylaws, and with that bylaws, identify president, vice president, secretary, with term limits or with terms, list length of terms, I guess I should say. It's something we haven't done, and it's something that really, as a committee, standing committee, it's something we should be looking at. So that's gonna be our emphasis in the January, February timeframe, so. So what I looked at, I just went and looked at January of 2018, 19, and kind of, there were some maybe people that came in within that, you have a better date of when you started, but those are the dates that I saw.
I started on this committee back a couple of years after I moved here, and that was in 97.
You've been here for a long time,
All right, no,
Just a little after John.
as long as I can remember, yeah.
Been on this forever.
1997.
I'm actually the official email, I was voted on this committee January of 2018. So when I got voted on this, onto the sewer and water,
18 or 19?
18.
18,
What
okay.
year did you say?
It was in December 2017 is when I emailed Sandy about joining this group and planning.
It
this.
wasn't as organized as it is.
I was just
now.
looking at all my emails.
What do you want? Any idea?
This is as good as any.
Good as any, okay, well,
I mean, I could probably figure it out closer, but
It's one, I did this about 5 minutes till 6, so I did it really quick, so I didn't spend a whole lot of time on it. Joe, I thought was in February of 2020. I was in February 2015. John was April of 2024. So what we plan to do now, at this meeting, Paul has indicated that he is resigning from the committee due to business travel in 2025. So I make a motion, we approve to council Paul Janetto's resignation. I don't want to say grudgingly, but we sure do miss your input, that's for sure.
I'll second.
All you gotta do is say, "Well, I want off, and you can get out of it."
You didn't know that, huh? No, that's not how it works.
I didn't want to hurt you for quorum next year, so that's why. So,
So what we plan to do in January then is to, in our particular case, we would, now, is there anybody else? Are you good for another year or so?
Sure. Best Tuesday night of the month right here.
Ross? You've been on a long time, but
I'll be around a while longer. I gotta get my water and sewer hooked up yet first, so.
well, give it some thought. We'll come back first of the year and identify. So what we'll be doing is we'll be posting on the city website openings in our water and sewer committee is the plan. So with that, we also need to in January, identify who we should continue with or who we should have as president, vice president, secretary, and the length of terms. Whether it's 2 years or, or it will be longer or less, but that's more feedback from Jason on that too, but that's what we plan to do in January, so.
I can tell you, planning and zoning had 3-year terms for its committee members.
Sorry.
Per our bylaws, planning and zoning was 3-year term limits, so that 2 years is kind of short. Just because you have turnover and you finally get to know what you're doing, so. You kind of want to have some, you don't want to make it super long, you like, Ross, 1997 till now. But you also don't want it too short.
Yeah.
It's a balance. And then you try to have staggered. The other thing I'd recommend that you try to do is stagger it, so you don't have all new people coming on at one time.
Yeah.
Oh, Ryland,
Yes.
May of 2018.
Oh, no. May 2018, thank you. All right. So like the president, either one of the presidents is 3, 2, 1 or 1, 2, 3, or the idea is just to stagger them. So. All right, so we'll post for 2 openings. You let me know. Give us some thought. But,
I'll be around for a while yet. Who knows, I might tip over this week, so.
well, you can call in from heaven, that's okay.
I don't know if I get time off.
Talk to St. Peter. Okay. So we'll leave you on for now.
Sure.
You let me know, please. All right, all in favor of Paul's resignation, signify by saying aye. Oppose. Official, you can leave us.
Go right now. Yeah.
Go. Don't let the door slam you on the way out. Just kidding. All right, I think that's it for the evening. Good meeting, good discussion. Better make a motion, the meeting adjourned.
I'll second that motion.
Oh, Austin.
All in favor, say aye, 8:25. All right, thank you.
So 18 to 24, so 6 years?
I think it's 7, right?
I suppose, yeah. Feels like yesterday, doesn't it?
Goes by fast,
Oh,
fun times.
Amazing how many 9 years have gone by.
yeah, it happens to all of us.
A question on the property that you said was P, that's not the city's, you have to annex it first before you can do development. What is the process of annexing into the city? Like, what is that? Like, how do you do that?
The annexation process.
Yeah, like,
Oh,
do they get to vote on it? Like, how does that work?
Oh, I think it's gotta be a council action. I don't know. It'd be a good question because they're not petitioning for annexation.
Right.
It would be a,
Where's trying? So that's why I was just curious, how does that work? Like,
Well, we have orderly annexation agreement, and that's
between,
between the township and the city. We've had that since 2015.
okay,
And comes up for our 10-year review in 2025. Originally was in 2009, I think is when it started.
so is it like a timed thing or is it just based on needs? Like when, like in this case, it's, you said it's surrounded by,
There's no firm. If all four sides are touching you, you have to annex. There's nothing, it's all up to the owner. Now, we don't want, eminent domain is the other possibility, but that's not really. We don't think about that, but it's really a petition by the owner to join. With them, and I don't know if they have any type of HOA or
bless you.
in the township there.
It's all individual sewers, but one common water system.
Is it one common?
So if that water system was, I don't know, have issues or,
I thought there was multiple smaller systems there on the water side. You think it's just one, huh?
I'm pretty sure it's just one, there's no shut offs, so when it comes time for fixing a leak or repairing something, they shut the well off.
Everybody.
And they dig a trench along the property until they find a water line and